All right. Hey, good morning, everyone. My name is Tom Houpt. I am a senior partner development specialist with VMware Carbon Black. I'm going to be walking you through a little bit about the cyber threat landscape, some of VMware's vision, walk you through the Carbon Black product, as well as our competitive differentiators. So thank you very much for your time this morning, and we'll hop right into it. So starting with VMware's vision, it's being able to access any application from any device, regardless of what cloud infrastructure you're using on the back end, and keeping it secure along every step of the journey. Transitioning into the threat landscape, there are a number of different metrics I could pull up here. I decided to go with these three. Starting on the left-hand side here, since 2015, we've seen a 15 times increase in damage from ransomware. So when ransomware first came onto the scene, right, it was essentially the attacker would encrypt all of the files in an end customer's environment, and then ask for the ransom, and that was sort of it. But things got more elaborate from the attacker over time. They started adding a clock in there. You have 48 hours, you have 72 hours, something of the sort, to really put that pressure on the end user. And then for every hour that they don't pay the $10,000 or the 2 Bitcoins or whatever the ransom was asking for, they delete X amount of data from there as well, or upload it onto the web, something like that. So we've seen a real increase in damage from it, and we've also seen ransomware become so much more prevalent in the wild. 68% of breaches took months or longer to discover. So we call this a living off the land attack. Essentially, an attacker gets into an end customer's environment and sits there for a week, multiple weeks, months. And the point of this is they're really just trying to understand what sort of activity is normal in an end customer's environment. They're trying to understand where they can strike that's going to cause the most damage, and when they can strike that's going to cause the most damage. So these living off the land attacks, commonly missed by some of those legacy players in the space, but definitely one of those next-gen sort of attacks. And then finally, 27% of end customers are confident that their AV will protect them from ransomware. So really that highlights two things. And one is the first point on this slide, which was, ransomware is extremely prevalent nowadays. And then the second is that end customers are telling us that we need stronger protection. We need to offer stronger protection than what they were used to with the legacy players in the space. So the three biggest obstacles that VMware has seen when facing security today, the first one is siloed, right? So there's these different teams within the overarching IT organization. You have your network team, workload team, endpoint team, et cetera. They all have their own vendor. They all have their own vendors that they work with. All of those vendors have their own consoles, agents, data sets that they're working with. And so ideally, these different teams within an end customer's organization try to work in tangent and move towards that goal of a secured end customer environment. But because they're all of these different teams are using different tools, different agents, different consoles, different data sets, it's a real manual lift for these teams to try to parse together the data from the different teams. So really what ends up happening is that these teams just end up working in their own silos and not working as an overarching team. Generally speaking, the tools that these teams use are threat centric. So they're hunting after specific pieces of known bad. In the case of endpoint security, it'd be hunting after specific pieces of malware. That was all well and good 30 years ago, but it just isn't enough nowadays with the different sorts of attacks like ransomware, like living off the land attacks, like zero-day attacks. And then finally, these tools that the control point teams use are bolted on, right? The infrastructure is already in place, and then they slap a tool on the side and finger cross that it's going to work. Generally speaking, it leads to too many consoles, too many agents, which I've already talked about, and it leads to control misconfigurations, false positives, and ends up keeping the end customer in their environment, in their console, trying to remediate all of this extra noise. So these are the security control point teams that I was talking to you about: endpoint, identity, network, cloud, and workload. To highlight my point of the different vendors in each of these different control point spaces, if we take a look at the endpoint team, you can see all of these different tools that that an endpoint team has to choose from when it comes to which vendor they're going to go with. Same thing with cloud security over here. Same thing with network security over here, right? Every one of these vendors has their own agent, their own console, their own data set, and it really becomes hard for these different teams to try to tie it all together. So that's where VMware steps in. And in an attempt to simplify everything, we have a product offering for all of these different control points. So at these different control points, not only can we keep it secure, but we can put visibility in there as well. And when we look at it, the endpoint services team has Workspace ONE, the networking team has NSX, DevOps has our newer offering, Tanzu, the cloud team's got vSphere, and then the InfoSec team has Carbon Black. And that's really where we're going to hone in on today. So with VMware being able to offer all of these different product offerings for these different control point teams, what we see is a shift from these previous obstacles down here into a much more concise security posture. So siloed, right? These teams before, they were working in their own silos, hard time having data flow back and forth, getting agent fatigue or console fatigue, trying to jump between them all. And VMware can unify it all, right? These integrations between our products exist, data flows easily, and there's no manual lift from the end customer to try to parse it all together. Because VMware is such a critical part of the infrastructure, we don't need to take that threat-centric approach. We can take that context-centric approach. We understand the baseline activity, the baseline good activity of an end customer. And then more importantly, we understand as that activity starts to drift into suspicious or malicious events, right? So we understand as things become suspicious, we really need to keep an eye on this rather than just like, all right, is this a piece of malware? Is this a piece of malware? We have the overarching picture in mind. And then on that same note, right, we're not bolted on, we're not slapped on the side, we're intrinsically there, we're part of the infrastructure, we're the core of the infrastructure. So we understand what's happening with the other tools, really aiding in the context-centric part. It's not just another sort of foreign language slapped on the side and fingers crossed it's gonna work. We're in there, we understand what's happening, which just leads to more simplicity and less false positives. Now, when it comes to our go-to-market strategy for Carbon Black, it's all centered around the cloud, right? Just like pretty much the rest of the tech nowadays. So as this slide builds out, you'll see the product offerings that we have on the top here, as well as the operating systems and cloud infrastructure that we work on at the bottom. So I'm going to walk you through these different slides in a little bit more detail. But just so you know, right now what you're seeing is our cloud-based options. One point that I want to call out before going into this is we do have a couple of on-prem solutions as well. So these on-prem solutions are extremely mature at this point. Carbon Black App Control dates back to 2002, and Carbon Black EDR, the on-prem version, dates back to 2011. So they've been around, they're extremely mature at this point. They make up a good portion of our customer base, so we're not going to be sunsetting them by any means. These on-prem tools still have a lot of places where they fit today, right? So Carbon Black App Control is a approved listing tool. So instead of like an AV, trying to block the known bad, it's only going to allow the known good to run, all right? So when it's deployed, IT or SecOps, whoever it is, defines the parameters of known trust in an environment, and then anything that falls out of those parameters of known good is going to be default deny. Now, this tool is very great for fixed function devices. So if you think of POS machines, if you think of ATM machines, gas pumps, any sort of fixed function devices that really are only doing 2, maybe 3 functions, this is really picture perfect for them. Carbon Black EDR is an on-prem solution. It's a visibility tool. It's meant for end customers who are getting proactive in their security posture. And in these two tools, they they're on-prem, and the reason that we still have them around, again, I already mentioned, they make part of our customer base, a large part of our customer base, but there are still end customers who are cloud adverse. They're not willing to take the step into the world of cloud at this point, and that's fine. We can help them here. There are also end customers who sit in certain verticals or industries that have compliance mandates, which require them to host their infrastructure on-prem rather than in the cloud. All right, so why companies are shifting to cloud-native security? Just a couple points on this. We can deploy and protect in hours and not months, right? So if we think back to March, when all of a sudden companies were just shifting from their traditional working in an actual office to a distributed workforce, a lot of them, it kind of exposed that weakness of having these traditional on-prem security offerings where they thought they were secure under the corporate network, right? But when everyone's pushed out to their own respective homes, really need something that can protect them, that's easy to deploy to get out to these workers that are home and can protect them when they're off of the corporate network. So with a simple, SCCM or another deployment tool, the agent pushes right out, gets into our standard protection mode, and it's good to go. We contain, looking at this next point here, whether you're on the corporate network, off the corporate network, working at Starbucks, or not even connected to the internet, our policies are still enforced. So it's protection, again, in all of those different scenarios. We scale effortlessly from, 50 endpoints to 50,000 endpoints. Doesn't matter. It's very easy. And then finally, it's improved analytics, right? So by being deployed globally to different organizations, we can see as, maybe a new strain of ransomware attack kicks off in China or something like that. That analytics that our cloud is picking up, the endpoints are picking up, get shifted up to our cloud. The cloud does their analytics on it and pushes out the results to the endpoints that are sitting elsewhere around the world, whether Europe, the US, LATAM. So it's really benefiting from that big data analytics approach. Diving into the actual products themselves, we're starting with Endpoint Standard. Endpoint Standard is our flagship solution. It is certified to directly replace any sort of those legacy antiviruses out there, ones that you think of from 10, 20 years ago. So we have that standard band listing approach, right, where basically we do that one-time initiation crawl through an environment when we're deployed. This picks up on any pre-existing malware, and it's basically a good way just to get rid of the low-hanging fruit, right? So we just get that malware out of the environment, and then we're off to our next couple of prevention layers, one of which is artificial intelligence and machine learning. And this picks up on the statistical variance of that commodity malware, helping to keep a lot of the noise out of the environment. And then finally, we have a technology called event stream processing. Now, event stream processing looks at the way that applications are interacting with each other to pick up on malicious behavior from there. So the example that I always like to use is, say an end customer sits down at their desk, they open up Outlook, they open up the first email that they have in their inbox, and attached to it is an Excel file. They click on Excel. What they see in the foreground, right, it's just a spreadsheet with useless data. They don't really think anything of it. But what they don't see is in the background, there was an embedded macro, which launched an instance of PowerShell. And now the attacker's off to the races, trying to beacon out to a malicious IP address, trying to upgrade admin rights, trying to encrypt files. So on the surface there, right, we have three known good trusted applications, and that's how legacy antivirus would see it. They'd see Outlook, they'd see Excel, and they see PowerShell. Known good trusted applications, don't need to think twice about it, right? But obviously there's more to the story. With event stream processing, one of our prevention layers, we see that behavior. We see the way that these applications are interacting with each other and see that it's become very suspicious and malicious by the time it gets to that PowerShell instance. So we can apply prevention as soon as things start getting suspicious or malicious there, rather than just combing right over it, seeing those three applications and thinking everything's good to go. Now in this tool, we have out-of-the-box prevention policies. right, to make things easy as it's first deployed, but we really stick with the idea of every end customer's environment is different, and we can't just take a simple toggle switch approach to try to turn prevention on or turn prevention off. That's what a lot of our competitors do, and ultimately it either leads to a whole lot of false positives or not enough prevention from a tool. So being able to customize our policies, it allows the tool to be fine-tuned to each environment. It reduces the number of false positives over time, and it also protects the end customer's environment. It bolsters their security posture over time. All right, moving on here, we have a tool called Audit and Remediation. Now, this is a tool based off of Facebook's OS query. It was an open source project that we took and built into our own querying tool. So right now there are approximately 250 queries built into Audit and Remediation. You know, everything from who's running an outdated version of Adobe to who's running an outdated version, who's running a Google Chrome extension not signed by Google, or, you know, I'm pushing out a patch on Tuesday. Which one of my endpoints don't have enough memory for this patch to take? So it's those sorts of questions that, you know, IT and security can use to really have that current state understanding of their environment. There are built-in queries, or suggested queries, I should say, for patch management, suggested queries for vulnerability assessment, suggested queries for IT hygiene. And then if you know SQL, there's the ability to write your own SQL query in there as well. So it really helps to track and report on IT drift, depending on what metrics you're looking after. And if the auditor comes to town and, you know, he's looking to know the question to answer A, he's looking to know the question to answer B, all you need to do is turn to the tool, turn to Audit and Remediation, ask question A, ask question B. Once those endpoints check in with their answer, then you've got the data that the auditor is looking for, and you can get them through the audit in no time flat. Looking at enterprise EDR now, so enterprise endpoint detection and response. When I was on a few slides ago, I was talking about the on-prem version of our EDR tool. This is essentially one and the same, except it sits in our cloud, right? So for those who aren't cloud averse, for those who are taking a step into a cloud, this is right for them. So this is for organizations looking to get more proactive with their security posture. You know, maybe they have a threat hunter on staff, maybe they have a SOC team, but really it's for the more advanced teams out there. It is full visibility into everything, right? So Carbon Black Endpoint Standard, which I talked about 2 slides ago, right, our flagship solution, it's got a very easy to digest process tree in there, and it bubbles up a lot of information. Endpoint Standard will bubble up what it deems interesting. Enterprise EDR will bubble up everything. So it has every sort of executable on an endpoint, everything that's happened, you can dive into, take a look at, get as deep as you'd like, and then there's even more visibility on top of that. There are out-of-the-box watch lists there's 35 of them built in, and then sticking with the theme of being able to be customized, it is, you know, it has the ability to let you run your own custom watch list, right, specific for your environment. One thing I want to mention with, it's not unique to endpoint detection and response. It's actually a feature of all of our cloud solutions, is something called live response. So live response allows for IT or you know, whoever is running the tool to perform a light remote shell into another end user's environment, right? So if we think back a couple of years, say IT was based in Houston, and, you know, there was an end user in New York. The end user in New York had something go wacky with his computer, couldn't do the simple troubleshooting over the phone. So that end user needed to pack up their laptop, ship it down to Houston, right? So that's a day right there. IT in Houston, they get it, they take a look at it, they do their best to remediate it, but chances are they don't have enough visibility into it, so they do a full, you know, a full reimage of the machine. That's a whole day right there, and then IT packs it back up and ships it back to the end user, which is another day, right? So the end user has about 3 days of downtime, as well as a computer that, instead of just having a simple remediation fix, got fully reimaged. In the scenario, if IT or the SOC team or whoever it was had access to live response, then they'd be able to perform a light remote shell from Houston to the end user in New York. They'd be able to see what's going on with the visibility that we offer in our tool and be able to, perform a memory dump, terminate a specific policy or action that's going on, and a whole lot of other things. So it really can reduce any of these remediation problems from 72 hours down to something as simple as 15 minutes. So it's a huge time saver there. And then finally, we have a tool called Managed Detection. It is an MSSP Lite. The last thing that we wanted to do is compete with our channel partners. This is a tool that for end customers who still elect to manage their own environment, it's a way to leverage some of the security expertise on our side. Really, I want to drive this point home on this. We are not going to be fully managing an end customer's environment for them. This is just some additional eyes on glass. It's 24/7 by 365. When a higher priority alert comes in through the endpoint standard dashboard, that alert and the associated data gets shipped off to our SOC team in Boulder, Colorado. We take it, analyze it, provide root cause analysis, some suggested steps that the end customer take, and suggested policies that they tweak. Really, it's, again, to drive the point home, we're not going to be fully managing it. We didn't want to compete with our channel partners. So this is really only for organizations that are still looking to manage their security in-house rather than utilize an MSSP. I'm going to talk just quickly from a high level on some of our key competitors and our key differentiators. You can see the big ones up here. CrowdStrike is hands down our biggest competitor. It's really a two-horse race with us and them. And so I'll give them credit where credit is due. You can see some of the other ones as well. Cisco, SentinelOne, Cylance, Microsoft, some of the others you might have heard in the space like Cybereason or Symantec, right? We got McAfee in here as well. So I'm just going to talk high level of Carbon Black's competitive differentiators. So the first one is our consolidated cloud native endpoint protection platform. Single agent, single console, single data set, right? So if you were looking to deploy endpoint standard, audit and remediation, and enterprise EDR, you'd only need a single agent. You'd be working out of one single console, and there's a single data set that you're utilizing there, right? It really helps to cut down any sort of fatigue in terms of agent fatigue, console fatigue, or like I was talking about way earlier in this presentation, the data set fatigue of trying to parse it all together. There's multiple endpoint capabilities that we offer already, right? So endpoint standard as a next generation antivirus, there are entire companies devoted to just that. Audit and remediation, the querying tool that we offer, there are entire companies devoted just to that. I'm sure you can think of a couple off the top of your head. Enterprise EDR, same thing, entire companies dedicated just to EDR. And we can offer all of that off of a single agent, single console, single data set. And then finally, we run on less than 1% CPU. Some of our competitors, when they do a scan, they jump way up to 50, 60, 70% of that CPU usage, which is why you see them needing to run, see end customers who would like to use those tools need to run those run those scans at 2:30 in the morning on a Tuesday or Thursday, so they don't end up interrupting the workflow of the rest of the organization. A true key differentiator for Carbon Black is the data that we collect. It's continuous centralized data collection. So we collect all of the data off of the endpoint. We don't pass any bias on it. Any executable we'll collect and we'll analyze. You never know what you're going to need when remediating an attack or when preventing attacks for that matter. So regardless of if it's benign, suspicious, malicious, we're going to hold on to that. For any benign data out of the box, it's not an extra price or anything like that. We're holding on to that for a minimum of 30 days. Any data associated with a suspicious or a malicious event, we'll be holding on to for 180 days. And then finally, I talked about how VMware is ideally going to be your one-stop shop for security, Workspace ONE, NSX, Carbon Black, etc. But we also understand that it's not completely feasible for every organization to do that. So we do integrate with other tools in the space. We have an open API. We have over 125 pre-built out integrations to make things very easy, and they're bi-directional integrations as well. So just to recap right here, the solutions that we offer, operating systems and cloud infrastructure that we work off of, we have a couple of those on-prem solutions right now. One of our newest announcements that it's so new we don't even have it for branding on this right now is Workloads Essential. So we're actually offering a free trial of this new Workload Essentials tool, which consists of audit and remediation that I walked you through, and then some of our new features like vulnerability management, inventory and life cycle management, and the vSphere integration, which is making Carbon Black agentless for the first time that we've ever seen that happen. So it's a free trial. It goes from the beginning of December until April. So there's a good chunk of time. If you're looking to learn more about that, just head on over to carbonblack.com. You'll find the link there. You can read through the data set, the data sheet, etc., to learn more. So just from a high level, you're able to leverage the data that we collect in the cloud. It's scanless. This is in regards to workloads. We prioritize vulnerabilities based on exploit, right? So instead of security teams they would need to go through, find a list of all the vulnerabilities that exist in their environment, prioritize that list manually, and then bring it over to IT and say, like, hey, can you fix this? It now does that for you. It finds the vulnerabilities, it prioritizes them based on what we know from the back end, what we know from our partners and from our customers, and really, it allows the IT team to get in there, and it just makes their job easier. And then finally, it's built into the Carbon Black Cloud and to vCenter. So whether you're working out of the Carbon Black Cloud or out, you're a vAdmin working out of vCenter, it's right there for you. Now, with all that said, I really appreciate your time this morning. If anyone has any questions, feel free to reach out. You can head on over to carbonblack.com to learn more about that Workload Essentials. And again, thank you for your time this morning. Really appreciate it.